Right, here's that Royal Enfield 700 Constellation that I've been working on recently off and on, and we're just about there with it now, not far to go, and I've already had our first video test ride on it, which went successfully. And I thought I'd just talk about a few points of interest on it. The Royal Enfield twins, the original Redditch built ones, were very different to what we have on the market today from India. And this one is a 700cc twin. They eventually grew to 736 to become the 750 Interceptor, which was a very potent machine. These share the same bore and stroke as the 350 Bullet. The 750s were a longer stroke, believe it or not. They were a longer stroke than the 500 Bullet as well, obviously, but these were the same bore and stroke as the 350 at 70 bore, 90mm stroke. So you basically got two tuned 350 Bullet engines side by side here, and I think these were around about 50 or 52 brake horsepower, I think, and very smooth running torquey engines, as we've probably seen in the video. Very long legged and smooth with a pretty high top speed as well. I just thought I'd look at a few interesting things on it. Obviously you got the neutral lever there, as you would have on the Bullets, the 4-speed Bullets, where you can go straight to neutral by pressing that pedal down from second, third or fourth, and if you're in first, just hook it up first and then press it down and it'll go to neutral. Got an interesting carburettor and manifold layout there, where I think the cylinder heads, if not the same, are very similar to the single carb heads, and they've come up with this manifold that curves outwards on either side, and you can just fit in a carburettor on each one there. You probably would have had chopped monoblocks originally. Some Constellations had a single TT carburettor as well, but these concentrics are obviously from a later era that someone's put on at some time in its life. You've got the optional rev counter drive and rev counter, and this is interesting, I like this. Some people have commented already that they think it looks messy and odd. I like stuff like this. It so obviously would have been an optional extra in its day, and it looks like so much of an afterthought the way this bracketry holds it on, but that is the factory bracketry. That is how it would have been done. It might look a bit of a bodge to some people, but it's a definite way round dealing with an afterthought and sticking a rev counter on. And I quite like the unusual sort of offbeat look of that, and it sort of reminds me, years ago when I was a youngster, I drove some tractors on farms. They were much older than me, the tractors, and I remember driving a Fordson Major, and that just had a little console. I think it had a key in it and a switch, and if I remember rightly, an amp meter and an oil pressure gauge, and that was it. But to the side of that basic console was the equivalent of this, which was called a tractor meter, and it gave you the engine revs and the speeds and the gears and the power take, all sorts of things. But that was also on a similar sort of bracket, and it was definitely an add-on and an afterthought. But don't they look interesting? I don't know, it just sort of adds to the appeal and the character of the bike to me. I think perhaps modern manufacturers could be missing a trick by not doing something like that myself. But anyway, I'm waffling. This would have been, should have been, a steering damper knob, but it's not doing anything. I've just got it held in there with tape wrapped around it, and the reason for that is, obviously, I didn't want to leave a hole down through the steering head nut, but unfortunately, as this bike came, originally, well not originally, but as it was when it came here in its sort of largely dismantled form, it had a separate aluminium top yoke on it with just a speedometer clock hole, and the bottom yoke that went with it is still in use here, and unfortunately it's solid through the centre, so there's nowhere for a steering damper rod to pass through. So I hit a bit of a dilemma. I wanted it to look right, so got that in there, but there's no steering damper fitted. Also, because of the nature of the bottom yoke that we are using and this casket which the owner sent with the bike to be fitted, I ended up finding out that the nut that screws down onto the stem of the bottom yoke, so it bottomed out on its threads before it tightened down and clamped down on this, so I've had to come up with a couple of spacers there, which in turn has meant that the bracket for the rev counter sits a little higher than it would have done originally. So I also had to fit a slightly longer stud there where it picks up to fasten the bracket to, and add a little spacer to it there. So basically make the thing correct and look as it should do, but it all sits about 1/4 of an inch or so higher than it would have done originally. And that's pretty much it. We've got a lovely Siamese 2-into-1 exhaust. I could have had a exhaust pipe and silencer either side, but this was available and it looks good, and it actually saved the owner a few quid because he only had to buy one silencer, so that made sense. We've got paint on the rear mudguard which sort of looks almost a little like polished aluminium or old sort of dulled chrome, which I think works better than if we'd gone to the expense of having the mudguard re-chromed, because the front mudguard, the chrome on that was passable but not like new, and it's in keeping with the character and the look of the bike. So I think overall we pretty well got it right there. We've also got new kickstart, gear lever, neutral lever, and these inspection covers, and this here, all those things were looking a bit tatty and scabby, so they've been changed, but kept a lot of the original old stuff on the bike as well. And I think sort of overall that everything sort of fits quite well and looks quite well with everything else, and I'm hoping that the owner's going to be very happy with it. I think I'd be quite pleased with it if it was mine, but nice old bike and something a little bit different from the more frequently seen BSAs and Triumphs and even Nortons.